Good afternoon to everybody. I want to have this kind of official entering our conversation, our lecture of this afternoon. I'm delighted to welcome you also in the name of Eka Gedevanishvili and of Annette Hoffmann to the event of this afternoon, the lecture of Ekaterine Gedevanishvili, organized in the framework of the Georgia lecture series, part 2. It's a pleasure for me to introduce Dr. Ekaterine Gedevanishvili, long-standing partner of the KHI and of us, so to speak, in the Georgia project, with whom years ago everything began. I mean, I remember the first meeting we had in 2005 or so in the snow.
2002 it was.
No, 20 years ago.
Oh, sure. Yes.
That's unbelievable.
I checked it.
I don't believe, but it's 20 years. It's a good number, and it was a very intense 3 hours presentation by consecutive translation. Today we speak just in English, and I am very happy that Ekaterine joins us spontaneously this time. I remember the first joint seminar in 2006 with Annette and then Barbara Schellewald and other partners. Eka Gedevanishvili took part in some of the events in the first joint seminars on medieval Georgian art. I don't want to run along your whole career. You have studied in the Gedevanishvili State University in Tbilisi and Ekaterine obtained her PhD in 2004 with a dissertation on the representation of the Holy Face in Christian art. If you once start to think about the Holy Face, you will do it forever. I share this obsession, if you want. Okay, so there are news to be told today. Well, in 2005, she became a senior researcher at the Chubinashvili National Research Center for Georgian Art History and Heritage Preservation, where she, until now, is extremely active and important member of the community. The specialization of Ekaterine is medieval Georgian wall painting and icons. She has been working on several very important research projects and participated in many international conferences and congresses in Georgia, England, Switzerland, Italy, and other places. At present, she runs a multidisciplinary project that aims to prepare a monograph dedicated to the cult of the holy warriors in Georgia. Ekaterine got many grants, for instance, of the Chubinashvili National Science Foundation of Georgia, but not only. I just want to recall the last of our joint activities. That was in 2019 summer school Tau Gladiati, organized with Eka Gedevanishvili and in collaboration with the KHI, and it was a pre-lockdown activity where also the universities of Basel and Fribourg were involved, and we hope that now in 2022 we start again to have these very creative and very important site visits and site seminars. What else to be said? I mean, there are important articles Ekaterine has published. I don't go into that to list them, but just because my curiosity is extremely high to hear your lecture. So please, Ekaterine, I would like to invite you to present your lecture on the Unpainted Image of Christ, Textual and Visual Tradition in medieval Georgia. Please, Ekaterine.
Thank you very much for presenting me, dear Gerhard. And I would say it's my honor, great honor, to participate in this series of lectures. And I must confess, I found myself even very lucky, since it is the second time I have this stage. And I would just like to say that it is of a great importance. This program is especially important because it gives a possibility for Georgian art historians to promote the Georgian art all over the world, I would say. And that's why I would like to give my very special thanks to you and to the organizers of this series, to Annette Hoffman and Eka Gedevanishvili. And before starting my lecture, I would just briefly recall you our first meeting in 2002 in Vatican Library, because it is directly connected and related to the subject I'm going to speak about. So the Holy Face of Christ. When I met you in 2002, the book of the Holy Face, Holy Face of Christ was just recently published. And I came to Vatican Library just to show you Georgian images. And to be honest, I will not forget this meeting, because your emotions when you saw the image of Vardzia, you said very emotionally that it really did, because you came to Georgia very soon, and actually it was the beginning of the long-term collaboration, and I would say friendship, that afterwards shaped into the collaboration, institutional collaboration between Chubinashvili and Max Planck Institute. So the lecture of today I'm going to present is actually the continuation of this long story that I hope will not finish. Thank you very much for all these years, dear Gerhard, for everything. So I think I can start now. And if you don't mind, I will share my presentation. Yes? So I will enlarge it. I think it is better. Okay. So the vita of famous Georgian saint George of Athonite preserves the polemical incident with the Patriarch of Antioch concerning the apostolic rites of Georgian Church. In the dispute, St. George focuses on the apostolic mission of St. Andrew, the first called, and argues that Georgia was a country that had never followed any kind of heresy. We are the heirs and the flock of him who was the first called, that is Andrew. And since we came to know the one God, we have never renounced him. However ignorant and frivolous you may consider us, and however wise and weighty you may deem yourself, yet there was a time when in all Greece no Orthodox faith was to be found, and John, Bishop of Goth, was consecrated in Tscheta, as it is written in the great Synaxary. It is telling that the hegemon of Iveran monastery illustrates the orthodoxy of the faith of Georgian people by Iconodule bishop's consecration in the ancient capital of Kartli. The holy face of Virgin Portaitis, as the symbol of Iberian identity in the commonwealth of the Athonite state, seems to stimulate this choice. The miraculous bleeding icon of the Theotokos, which according to biography of the icon had chosen the Iberians for her guardianship, stands for apology of the Athonite father's words, attesting through its history the particular importance of the icon worship in Georgia. Contrary to Byzantium, the defense of icons in Georgia was not limited to specific periods of iconoclasm. It was the continual defense of the Christological dogma against neighboring Armenian monophysitism, the major rival confession to Christian Orthodoxy in Caucasus. The special cult of Acheropoetos image in Georgia was rooted in the centuries-old tradition that was connected to the very origins of Christianization of the Georgian kingdom. According to ecclesiastic tradition, the apostolic mission of St. Andrew was inextricably linked to the image not made by the human hand. What is more, the text of Travels of Andrew opens the history of the conversion of Georgia with this very image. According to the text, the Virgin was asked by Christ himself to create an icon by impressing her face on a board, and it was then given to Apostle Andrew, who would be sent to Georgia. I'm citing the text. The icon would be protector of the kingdom that was allotted to the Virgin. It would substitute her presence and grant the mercy and protection of the incarnated God to the country that was the appanage of the Virgin. This was the icon that is known Is the Atzuri icon of the Holy Virgin, as is considered to be one of the most venerated relics of Georgian Church. The text of the Travels places a particular emphasis on the fact that the icon of Atzuri features the image of the Holy Virgin with an incarnated God, reproducing unpainted images of the Virgin and those of Christ. Georgian historical sources attest to the existence of another image not made by the human hand of the Mother of God. According to Juansher's chronicles, the fortress of Anakopi held an image of the All-Holy Mother of God. According to the text, no one knows its origin. It was found finished on the top of the mountain. Before the siege of the Murvankru, King Archil and Mir worshipped the icon and prayed before it, asking for the intercession of the Virgin. Subsequently, the Lord gave the victory to a small group of Christians. In the spiritual history of the Georgian nation, the Acheropoet and icons of the Virgin, and primarily that of Atzuri, tend to provide the basis for the cult of another highly venerated miraculous icon not made by the human hand, the Holy Face of Christ, which in the course of time became the Palladium of Georgian kingdom. The murals of Ascension of the Cross at Chiomguime Church seems to reflect this historical connection. The juxtaposition of the images of the Mandilion and that of the Hodigitri icon recalls the unity between two Acheropoetes images attested to in Georgian narrative tradition. The history of unpainted images of Christ in Georgia is quite ambiguous. Beside the official story of Abgar's epistle that was translated into Georgian at the beginning of the 11th century, the theme of the Holy Face was further developed in hymnography and hagiography, in which focus was placed on the transposition of the image to Georgia and its local history. These were the spheres where local traditions flourished and reflected the significance of this subject in Georgian culture. Ecclesiastic tradition connected the cult of the icon not made by the human hand to Saint Anthony of Martopi, one of the so-called Assyrian fathers, 13 Assyrian fathers who came to Georgia in the 6th century. In general, the story of the Acheropoetes image in Georgia is recounted thus. Saint Anthony captured the keramion, holy imprint of the Edessa icon from the Nestorians, and brought it to Georgia. Possession of this precious relic became so veritable that its location was associated with a very concrete place, the Martopi monastery. The relic of the keramion was sheltered there till the 14th century, but disappeared after the Tamerlane's invasion. Alongside the story of the keramion of Martopi appears the importance of another icon, the image of Christ that was kept in the Cathedral of Anchi, in the southern part of Georgia. Famous hagiographic text written in the 10th century, the life of Saint Grigol of Khansta, attests to the very special importance of this icon. According to the Vita, the church of Anchi was specially constructed to house this actual relic and was even referred to as the Church of the Living Icon of Christ. The huge icon of Savior is an encaustic icon dating back to the 6th and 7th centuries. Scholars often pointed out the connection of this oldest image of Christ with the Syrian-Palestinian artistic tradition. The Anchi icon appears actively on the stage of history from the end of the 12th century, when it was embellished with a donation by one of the most prominent rulers of Georgia, Queen Tamar. An inscription executed in the Old Georgian Asomtavruli script states that the bishop of Ancha, Ioan Erkinaeli, adorned the icon by order of Queen Tamar. The bishop himself dedicated a hymn to the icon, announcing it to have been brought to Georgia from Hierapolis by Apostle St. Andrew. This is the version of the legend that never enjoyed further development, though, in my opinion, it reflects the memory connecting the Acheropoetes image with the apostolic mission in Georgia. I also suppose that this version might remotely echo the text of the Travels of Andrew, narrating that after the Pentecost, Saint Andrew and Apostle Thaddeus arrived at the city of Edessa, stayed for a while at King Abgar's place, and afterwards Saint Andrew moved to Kartli, thus indicating a connection to Apostle Andrew to Edessa and King Abgar, and possible connection to King Abgar's story. Obviously, the icon of Anchi initially appears to be the keramion, the likeness of the Holy Face. Its original location, Hierapolis, indicates this significance. This version of the legend is established and further developed in the 13th century works of Catholicos Arsene, son of Bulmaisim, and Sabas Fingalos, which connects the relic of Anchi to Saint Anthony of Marcopi. In the chants of Arsene, the relic is openly declared to be Palladium of Georgian kingdom. Rejoice the Georgian nation, let us pray and thank the incorruptible image not made by the human hand, that is the power and strength and glory of our kingdom. According to Catholicos, possession of the relic of Keramion awards a special privilege to Georgia, equalizing it with Byzantium. The son of the cities possess the holy cloth, while Kartli owns the tile imprint not made by the human hand. The special importance of the Anchi icon was attested by later multi-layer embellishments of the relic. Alongside the layer of the 12th century, it comprises those of the 14th, 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. Nino Ciccinadze paid special attention to the program of the adornment of the Anchi's Khati icon, emphasizing the fact that the frame of the icon does not contain a visual reference to the story of the Edessa icon, as we have in the case of the Genova or Sinai icons. Instead, Anchi displays imagery that usually accompanies the image of the Christ the Pantocrator. The scholar explains such diversity of the program through different approaches to interpretation of the image. The Genova and Sinai icons refer to the history of the actual relic, while Anchi revetment gives the image more general meaning and broadens its significance, turning out the Anchi's Khati icon into the icon of the incarnation and manifestation of the Orthodox creed. According to 18th century inscription, the icon of Anchi is identified as the relic of Edessa. The inscription tells the story of the Edessa icon that was transferred from Edessa to Constantinople and afterwards to Georgia. And then, when Leon the Isaurian and other iconoclasts appeared, the holy relic was transferred to Klarjeti, to the Church of Anchi. In this way, the journey of the relic is shown with chronological inaccuracies, identifying the Anchi icon not as the Keramion, but as the Edessa icon itself. A similar identification of the Anchi icon can be found in Arcangelo Lamberti's Colchida Sacra. This is the text dating back to the 17th century, where the Italian missionary describes the Anchi church to be dedicated to Sudario d'Algarozzo. According to Irma Karaulashvili's supposition, the soul for this transformation of the Anchi icon from Keramion to Mandilion can be already traced from Arsene's text, who connects the Georgian relic to Edessa. It should be noted that this text shows the knowledge of the famous text of Narratio, the Imagine Edessena, traditionally attributed to Constantine Porphyrogenetus. The scholar argues that the text of Arsene demonstrates an immediate influence of the latter, enriching his text with the details borrowed from Narratio, such as miracle of the creation of the Keramion in the city of Edessa instead of Hierapolis. This approach is further developed in the contemporary comments of Avusseris Zetbeli, dedicated to Arsene's text, where the author directly connects the Georgian relics to the Edessian one, saying that the relic first came from Edessa to Constantinople, and afterward it was transferred to Kartli, in such way identifying two relics to each other. The symbolic unity of these relics is also attested to in Georgia by the liturgical practice of commemorating the Holy Face. The generally accepted feast of the Mandelion, celebrated on 16th of August in Byzantium, includes commemoration of the Anti-icon as well, thereby combining the liturgical unity of the local relics with the Edessian one. In the oldest version of the lives of Assyrian fathers, it is the very early of 10th century, that was discovered on Mount Sinai relatively recently. The veneration of unpainted images in Georgia appears once more, but in a different light. According to this text, among the Assyrian fathers were monks who had used to serve the miraculous image of Christ in their homeland. The servant monk and diacon Thaddeus, and the servant and chancellor of the image Asterios of Nabu. Both of them wished to create an image of Christ, but when they began making preparation, instead they received miraculously created images of Christ. It is noticeable that the theme of Acheropoetes image is still linked to Assyrian fathers, as Zaza Alexidze would put it, to those who are regarded as the third converters of Georgia to the true faith, and consequently the icon of incarnation is staunchly connected with those whose main purpose was to strengthen the Chalcedonian faith in Katli. The inclusion of this subject in the text of the deeds of Assyrian fathers can be regarded as a reflection of increasing national self-consciousness among Georgians, coinciding with the process of the country's unification that had begun toward the end of the 10th century. Indeed, the Holy Face emerged as one of the most important relics, granting special authority and power to Georgian kingdom. Accordingly, its distinct cult was variously attested to and specifically demonstrated in different spheres of art. The significance of this subject in literature was supported by numerous Georgian manuscripts, numbering more than 60, which contain Abgar's epistle. The text of the correspondence exists in two versions: the shorter one, which was traditionally attributed to Saint Euthymius of Athonite, and the second, much longer version, translated by Saint George of Athonite, from which at least 3 different wordings were made. The contents of the manuscripts contained in the epistle also differ, including the 4 Gospels, liturgical collections, Vita of Saints, collections of homilies, and hagiographic work, among others. The addition of the Abgar's epistle to the Alaverdi and Gelati Gospels can be considered as a manifestation of this text's particular importance in Georgia. As Zaza Schirtladze argues, firm local tradition associated with the Holy Face in Georgia justified this choice. Indeed, the epistle text is perceived to be a continuation of the gospel text, containing direct analogies with gospel symbolism and context. The lavishly illustrated cycle attests to the special importance of the subject, as if equalizing it with the gospel text through adornment. So we have 2 very distinguished manuscripts of Alaverdi and Gelati Gospels, and I will show you the miniatures. And just note that Alaverdi contains 5 scenes from the Abgar epistle, while Gelati presents 10 scenes from the Abgar story, and I will show this, and afterwards I will come back. So, just to have a look. From this point of view, the Alaverdi Gospel commands a special attention, since it presents a unique image of the city of Edessa and a separate composition. The latter reveals an immediate association with the image of heavenly Jerusalem in Christian iconography. Some details of the miniature even convey palpable iconographic parallel to the heavenly city described in the book of Revelation. The walls garnished with precious stones, the reddish walls associated with jasper, the open gate representing the gate prospect of new heaven and new earth that shall not be shut at all day. The image of the cross on the tympanum of Edessa Gate instead of Mandylion make this association even closer, generalizing and equalizing the blessed and protected city of Edessa to the image of the heavenly Jerusalem, thus demonstrating the parallelism between the epistle and the text of the Revelation, both in terms of content and form. Both manuscripts place particular emphasis on the theme of the miraculous image. The epistle text of the Alla Verdi Gospel opens with a separate composition representing the Holy Face of Christ with the title Icon of Mandylion, while in the Gelati Gospel, the traditional structure of the text is altered. The chapter recounting the legend of Mandylion is presented as a separate section named for the Holy Mandylion. What is truly surprising is that representation of the keramion are rarely found in Georgian medieval art. For a country that was claiming to possess this actual precious relic, this gap is hardly explainable. Even the practice of featuring the paired images of the Mandylion and keramion, widely spread in Byzantine painting, is aligned to the Georgian tradition. I posit that in medieval Georgian art, the keramion and Mandylion images are synthesized, illustrating or rather manifesting an orthodox belief in equalizing the copy with the original. This concept of image theology that was openly illustrated by the paired images of the Mandylion and its replica in Byzantine art was transformed in Georgian art into the hybrid image, creating, so to say, generalized type of the Acheropoetes image, as if following the exegesis of the image based on Paulian words, who is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of every creature. It is not a mere coincidence that the essence of the icon, the concept of true archetype, can be also found in the narrative of the text of Assyrian Fathers itself. According to the text, Unpainted Image of Christ bears an unpainted Syrian inscription. He whom you behold has sent me. Tituli, that can be perceived as a textual model for the Georgian images. The special importance of the Holy Face in Georgia is primarily reflected in numerous images of wall paintings. They are distinctive not only for the variety and richness of iconographic versions, but also for the different topographical locations of the Holy Face within the program of the church decorations. We can speak about the local tradition of the topography of Mandylion and even the local iconographic characteristics of Georgian art. The present paper focuses mainly on those distinctive images and aims to highlight the specificity of Georgian examples. In the wall paintings of the 12th, 13th centuries, the Mandylion regularly appears in the sanctuary above the altar table, a place that is rarely chosen for Mandylion in the art of the Christian East. The Holy Face, so I'll present several schemes and images. The Holy Face of Christ is portrayed in the first register of the painting among the rows of the bishops. In exceptional case, among the cherubs, as we have, for example, in Saldashi example, and the Mandylion is mostly presented in conjunction with the scene of the daisies or the Maesta Domini in the Alps program. The Telovani murals dating back to the 9th centuries represent the earliest example of the Holy Face within the sanctuary program, although an image of the Incarnation appears here in the second register of the wall painting. It is included in the rows of the apostles presented below the conch composition that features Christ in majesty. It bears an explanation inscription, the Holy Face of God. The image is transformed here into the imago plipiata, so to say, a type of a true icon. pattern. What is unusual here are the two thick downward lateral lines that are presented on both parts of the circle, as if imitating the drapery. They represent the visual memoria of the cloth upon which the image archetype was originally imprinted. The Teldovani image, with its iconographic transformation and its location within the sanctuary space, is interpreted by Zaza Skhirtladze as the justification of the legitimacy of Christian images, manifesting the importance of image veneration in Georgia, counterpart to Byzantine iconoclasm. From the beginning of the 12th to 14th centuries, the mandilion in Georgia dominantly appears in the sanctuary above the altar table. This Georgian iconographic tradition totally changes the visual power of the image. The Holy Face appears to be a focal image of the sanctuary. It is always significantly enlarged in scale and functions differently on the visual level, attracting immediate attention due to its size and compositional features, the frontally disposed face lacking a body. Essentially, the symbol of the icon presents a substratum of icon, giving to the beholder the palpable impression of being face-to-face with God. The dynamicity of the liturgy, with its acts of revealing and concealing images of the sanctuary, creates a tangible impression of beholding the mystical reenactment of the incarnation of divinity during the service. This is the choice that visualizes the significance of the central Christian doctrine of the incarnation. The local topography of the Holy Face in Georgia obviously echoes the liturgical practice of placing the mandilion in the sanctuary as attested in the Edessa Cathedral. According to famous text of Narratio, mandilion was transferred from the sacristy to the sanctuary of the church on the first Sunday of Lent during a special procession headed by bishop, priests, and accompanied by twins. The relic was laid on a throne that symbolized the divine power overall and was placed on an elevated table to the east of the holy altar during the service. According to the text, the entrance into the church stands for Christ's coming on earth, while the return and removal from the holy altar to the sacristy represents his lifting up and ascension into the heaven after fulfilling his mission. Thus, mystical rite described in the text encompasses the whole symbolic context of divine economy in Christ, reflecting the immediate influence of the symbolism of the mystagogy of liturgy and symbolic interpretation of the ecclesiastical architecture. The text of Narratio accords special emphasis to the passion, the willing sacrifice undergone by Christ. This polysemantic symbolism was reflected in Georgian iconographic tradition by turning the mandilion into a token of the incarnation associated with the Passion, Eucharist, and Resurrection. The image of the Holy Face included in sanctuary programs also acquired a distinct eschatological context. Presented next to the daisies and Maesta Domini, it accumulates the soteriological symbol of the incarnation and passion, containing the significance of confronting the faithful with Christ in the future. Meaning of the Holy Face is strongly emphasized in the revetment of the anti-icon. As well, the image of Christ is presented here beneath the hetimasia, forming the central part of Georgian sanctuary programs and responding to the eschatological significance of the Holy Face attested to in Georgian textual tradition. From that point of view, that more attention. Here, the image of Christ, including in the daisy scene, is strongly associated with the type of mandilion spread in Georgian art, the representation of the face with neck, as if substitution of incarnation. The text of Narratio describes another rite held in Edessa, with a sponge that was soaked in water, and afterward gave to all the people the water that was squeezed. They anointed the faces with it and were filled with its holiness. This tradition was surprisingly extended in Georgia as late as the 18th century. As of the last king of Georgia, a special service was held at the was unable to because of his illness. Instead, Queen Mariam and her children prayed before the palladium of the Georgian kingdom, and the archbishop washed the icon of Anchi and sent the water to the king in a special vessel. The king washed his face with the holy water from the vessel and pronounced the paraklesia of the holy face that he knew by heart. This episode from the king's life obviously echoes the Syrian tradition that was maintained and remembered in Georgia over many centuries, once more evidencing special ties to the Syrian church and the historical origins of the Holy Face in Georgia. As stated above, the inclusion of mandilia in sanctuary programs of Georgian churches was especially widespread in the art of the 12th and 13th centuries. According to Ketevan Mikeladze, the prominence of the Anchi icon in the spiritual life of Georgia stimulated this tradition. I will add that alongside the special popularity of Anchi icon, this was an iconographic solution through which the Palladium of Georgia responded to theological discussions around the Eucharistic disputes raging in Byzantium, while at the same time answering major magisterial theological opposition within the country, the Armenian Miaphysitism. Christological disputes among rival churches in Caucasus were mainly centered around the subject of the incarnation, which had been persuasively answered through the image of the historical portrait of Christ. This centuries-old theological opposition between the Georgian and Armenian churches came to head in the 12th century, when most of the Caucasian lands were brought under the control of Georgia. This historical background, in its turn, has undoubtedly encouraged the consistency of this iconographic tradition in Georgia. The Gelati narthex painting openly demonstrates this theological link. The murals dating back to the first half of the 12th century present the 7 ecumenical councils. The icon of incarnation appeared here in proximity to the Chalcedonian Council. The latter is especially accentuated in Gelati. It is represented by 2 independently depicted episodes, the council itself and the miracle of Euphemia. You can see it on the gems of the window. Miracle of Euphemia, which was considered to be the blessing of the Diophysis face in the church history. The huge image of the Holy Face presented on the tympanum, which is almost lost today, was visually paired with the miracle of Saint Euphemia, illustrated on the gems of the window. Thanks to their scale and architectural framing, these 2 images appear to be the main theological focus of the whole program, manifesting the particular significance of the Chalcedonian dogma. It should be noted that the opposition between the Georgian and Armenian churches in this period was mainly centered on the different liturgical practices of the communion rite. One of the most eloquent examples reflecting this opposition is the Kobairi murals. Christ appears here over the altar table in the second register of the painting and is included directly in the scene of the communion of the apostles with bread and wine. I argue that Kobairi murals visualize the Georgian tradition of the Mandylion's topography in the murals of Georgian churches, elevating it to the second register of the painting and thus emphasizing its sacrificial symbolism in the whole program of the sanctuary. If we take in account the fact that the adornment of Kobairi church was carried out after it came into possession of Diophysites, the visualization of Georgian tradition gains a special significance, manifesting the importance of the human nature of Christ. Georgian images responded to global theological disputes, emphasizing the liturgical aspect of the Mandylion, even in the images rendered out of the sanctuary space. A representation of the Holy Face of Vardzia represents one of the most interesting examples of this type and is exceptional on account of its artistic value. The Holy Face is located on the tympanum of the church and appears beneath the scene of the communion of Saint Mary of Egypt, which is depicted on the arch above the entrance. The image of Christ is lacking the cloth and is presented on general blue-black ground of the whole painting, which today is badly damaged. The Holy Face is significantly enlarged in scale. Christ's visage is set off against the nimbus that is not fully closed and is excised by the edge of the entrance. Thanks to its compositional setting, the image appears to be descending from the wall into the space of the church, asserting a fundamental point of the incarnation dogma. So to say, the dogma of the coming of Christ in flesh, at the same time turning the Holy Face into an image of the Eucharistic offering per se. Your face, God of Jacob, is the body and blood, life-giving sacred meal, as announced in the text of Saba of Svingalos. The location of the image within the program of the church decoration extends the symbolic context of the Holy Face. It adorns the passage leading from the main space of the church to the narthex, where the viewer is faced with a huge program showing the Last Judgment. This placement of the image within the monastery with its defensive functions has been interestingly related by Gerhard Wolff to the topography of the Edessa icon itself, as if recalling the renowned Syrian Palladium and the topos of the blessed and undefeatable city. It is well known that the Holy Face of Christ became the main iconodule argument in the defense of the icon veneration during the iconoclasm. The Vardzia image contains this context as well, since it recalls the story of the conversion of Saint Mary of Egypt at the entrance of the church through the miracle of the icon, the episode that was cited as one of the most important apologetic arguments in the defense of the icons during iconoclasm. Saint Ephemius of Athonite, in his small Nomecanon, cites the icon of Edessa in the context of local disputes between Georgians and Armenians, recalling the Acheropoetes image of Christ as the most important iconodule argument against the iconoclastic mood of the Armenians. The argumentative significance of the Holy Face was later applied in Georgian literature to Anchischati relics itself. If the iconoclastic movement had by that time lost its actuality in Byzantium, the defense of icon still maintained importance in Georgia because of the Miaphysite heresy. The contemporary polemic literature, and in particular the works dedicated to the anti-icon, fully illustrate this notion. They discuss the doctrinal significance of the veneration of images, conferring particular importance on the Miaphysite heresy, even comparing to the iconoclasm in Byzantium. I believe that this specific historical background in its turn defined the very type of iconography of Mandilion in medieval Georgian art. The majority of images are very laconic in character. Most examples from the 12th, 13th centuries even lack the representation of the cloth that is so important in the semantic interpretation of the Mandilion iconography in generally. One of the most important compositional and semantic elements of the image, which according to Gerhard Wolff, symbolically and visually substitutes the body of Christ, is sometimes just omitted or nominally presented. For example, the Tangile murals, the Holy Face is presented as a chaste icon, representing the imitation of these media through painting. I regard this unusual solution as a reflection of the story of the Edessa icon itself. I mean, the episode of the elevation of the relic by King Abgar above the gate of Edessa, described in the text of Narratio as the image attached to the board and chased with gold. Thus, the Tangile image echoes the history of the original relic, at the same time emphasizing the transformation of the relic into materiality of the icon. To come back to Georgian images, in most cases, the cloth is represented as a simple geometric shape, rectangular or square, rarely adorned by ornaments. One will hardly find among Georgian examples of this time the representation of the draped textile so typical for the images of Mandylions. Georgian examples frequently even lack the representation of friezes. All this strongly emphasize the iconic character of the Georgian images. This association becomes even stronger when the Holy Face is included in the sanctuary program. It gives an impression of the icon resting on the altar table. This simplicity, or rather iconic shape of the Georgian images, reflects the argumentative character of the Mandylion, the image made by Christ himself as the image archetype that became the theological basis for the existence of the sacral images in general. I am not exaggerating if I claim that the theology of icon was in some way resonated through certain images of Mandylion. I will recall here the composition of King Abgar receiving the Mandylion from the Galati Gospel. I am afraid you can't see it well, but please trust me. So two images of Mandylion in the paired composition appears one above the other. In the upper scene, featuring the cure of the paralytic, Christ's gaze is directed in the right, while in the lower, he is looking in the opposite direction. The symmetrical location of two identical images gives a palpable impression of the animating of the image, thus manifesting through the compositional device the living presence of the archetype in the icon. The Galati image provides an interesting parallel for the scene of the receiving of the icon by King Abgar in the Moscow Menologion. The image of Christ is not frontal here. The face is slightly turned aside and the gaze of Christ is directed to the king, creating an impression of the meeting of two. To come back to Georgian images, what makes Georgian images of Mandylion even more unique is non-traditional iconographic type, the representation of the Holy Face with shoulders, with neck and shoulders. So I will show several examples. You can see it. The image of Mandylion with neck is not an exception, while the Holy Face with shoulders rarely appears in the art of the Christian East. Notably, yes, and you can find also in the icon painting, one of the most beautiful image of Georgian. So, notably, it becomes especially characteristic for images dating from the 12th and 13th centuries in Georgia. I posit that the systematic use of this type might still be related to the special cult of the Khati icon. The icon can be seen without revetment in Shalva Miranashvili's monograph. According to our Shalva Miranashvili, it originally presented the traditional type of the Holy Face, a face lacking a body, and was transformed into the Christ Pantocrator type as late as the 17th century. If the icon authentically presented the traditional image of Mandylion, the choice of rectangular tablet for this image is hardly explainable. I believe that icon originally presented an extended iconographic type of the image of Christ, and the Georgian version of Mandylia actually proves this hypothesis. The Holy Face of Christ that includes his shoulders echoes the special importance of this actual relic, though only partially reflecting it. This case seems to be very similar to that of the Lateran icon. As is well known, in the Latin West, the Lateran icon with its iconography stimulated the creation of the images of the Holy Face presented with bust. It should be noted that Nana Burchuladze, in her recent studies, connects the icon of Fanchi not to Mandylion iconography, but rather to the relic of Camuliana, another famous image not made by the human hand in Christian world, explaining its extended version of iconography by the influence of the imagery of this actual relic. To sum up, the image not made by the human hand, the history of which, according to ecclesiastic tradition, can be traced back to the very origins of the Christianization of Georgia, in the course of time emerged as Palladium of Georgian kingdom, granting it special power and authority, expressing through the iconic imagery of Mandilia the defense of the incarnation dogma itself, assigning the uninterrupted tradition of the icon worship in Georgia to be the main marker of orthodoxy. Thank you very much.